Zadnji je program 5. dana Festivala svjetske književnosti. Meni je velika čast da vas vidim ovdje, da ste došli slušati jednoga od najboljih suvremenih američkih pisaca, najsubverzivnijih autora romana koji je dobio Man Booker nagradu, i to je prvi američki autor koji je dobio nagradu Man Booker. Dame i gospodo, večeras je naš gost Paul Beatty. Razgovor će moderirati njegov hrvatski urednik Roman Simić. Knjigu je sa engleskog prevela Patricija Vodopija, Horvat, a simultani prijevod će za vas raditi na kanalu 1 hrvatski, na kanalu 2 engleski, Sonja Trzin-Berta. Molim vas jedan pljesak i za nju. Dame i gospodo, uživajte u ovom razgovoru koji će sigurno biti inspirativan.
Ja vas molim pljesak za Seka Srdarevića! Nakon što smo pljeskali Sejdu Srdareviću, Paul Beatty dolazi prvi put u Hrvatsku, puno toga je čuo, odlazi sutra i ja bih vas volio prije nego njegovog nastupa, dajte mu jedan onak najbolji zagrebački pljesak koji može ponijeti dalje gdje god išao. Paul Beatty! Paul djeluje jako ozbiljno, je ozbiljan čovjek, napisao je sjajnu knjigu u kojoj ima jako puno humora i ne samo da piše knjige s humorom, u kojima je humor važan, uredio je jednu antologiju koja se zove Kojom, antologija afričko-američkog humora 2006. I tu je ispričao kratku priču kako se prvi put sreo sa afroameričkom književnošću. Ako se ne varam, do njega je čudnim putevima došla knjiga Maja Angelu. Ovo su ti muški dodiri. I nakon toga kasnije, kad se susreo sa nečim što je tada bilo kanonom ili se zvalo kanonom afroameričke književnosti, on je zaključio da je pojam koji bi najbolje mogao opisati trezvenost. I onda poslije piše kako mu je, da bi došao put do netrezvene afroameričke književnosti, za njega je bio po prilici sličan onome koji je morao preći da bi u kući u kojoj je odrastao, u domu u kojoj je odrastao, imao je samo dvije ploče. Jedna je bila soundtrack iz U Zmajevom gnijezdu filma, a druga je bila Rufus featuring Chaka Khan ili nešto tako. Trud koji je on uložio da odatle dođe do ljubitelja free jazza bio je sličan ovom trudu koji je morao napraviti da dođe do netrezvene američke književnosti. Ono što bih ga pitao sada, s obzirom da je humor važan za sve što radiš, Paul, čini mi se da je uključen u sve tvoje knjige, što je to što si otkrio na putu do netrezvene afroameričke književnosti? Koja je tajna?
Yeah, I don't know what the secret is. I think, it's, for me it's like, the thing is, I'm just trying to create space, you know? I'm going to tell a sad story because it's sort of recent, but a writer I know, her name is Jade Sharma. She's, I guess maybe in her early 40s. She just died, and she was very funny, sort of a part of like this weird oddball circle of people that I knew in the East Village in New York. And I read like an obituary where she's talking about how she came to being funny, and she used to write poetry. And she said she realized, hey, if I just tell the truth, it's very funny. And so I love that. I think that's pretty simple and smart and accurate.
But, u Hokumu si našao zapravo cijeli niz autora koje nisi poznavao prije. Dakle, neki su ti bili sugerirani, prijatelji su ti rekli, na neke knjige si imao, našao ih u knjižnici i tako dalje. Zašto ti autori prije toga nisu bili dostupni?
I can't say why. I mean, some of it's just I'm not much of an explorer, so I don't necessarily go looking for stuff. I kind of just, things pass in front of my face. So when I read, you know, my mom is a huge reader, so I kind of just read what she wrote, and none of those people were black. So very few of them were women, but you know, those are the books that I read, you know, initially. But I mean, part of it, I mean, you read, you go to school, your friends recommend stuff, but I think people often see certain types of literature as having an agenda, you know? And so like being in school, people were giving, you know, it's like, this will be good for you, this will be, you know, and often humor's not a part of that, you know? And so, you know, I think what I learned later on is that stuff was out there, but it's just not in anyone's, other than maybe Invisible Man, really, in terms of books by African Americans. But it's you know, and part of it is the books that are written, the books that are published. I feel like it's still ongoing. I guess people feel like humor is like a luxury, oftentimes. And I don't think of it as that way. I just think of it, when I write, I don't try to be funny. You know, I'm just writing. But I think people say we don't have time for humor. There's all these other things that we need to do, and I just don't think that way. So for me, I was lucky enough to have, including my family, but to really just grow up with zero sense of propriety. You know, my mom never said, this is how you need to be, you've got it. You know, I just never got that. You know, I think I'm well-mannered. And she also never censored anything from us. You know, violence, humor, sex. I mean, yeah, never. And so, I think, you know, starting from what Jade Sharma said, it's just, I just never censored myself. You know, so, and part of that is like I don't have very much sacred, I guess in English the word is sacred cows. I don't really have any, you know, so I don't really believe in very much, you know, other than the freedom of expression. I don't really believe in very much.
Puno puta sam te čuo u intervjuima, znaš reći da osjećaš određenu nelagodu kad nastupaš pred ljudima ili kad čitaš pred ljudima svoj tekst. Počeo si kao pjesnik, počeo si kao spoken word artist, počeo si kao performer. Upravo si u New Rican Poets Cafe osvojio prvu nagradu kao slam pjesnik, koja je onda značila prvo objavljivanje knjige Big Bang Takes Little Bang. Što se dogodilo u međuvremenu? Znači, kako može čovjek koji ima nelagodu u nastupu pred ljudima osvajati slamove?
So I never considered myself a slam. I'm just a writer. So I just did this.
It's in Croatian, you know.
Yeah, it's all right. But I can read hokum humor. And whoever Sonia Tirzan.
Don't read the small line.
But so I mean, I just read. You know, I'm shy, and I just read. And for me, I think it's very important to let the words on the page speak for themselves. And I never felt, when I first started reading, when I first started writing, I was writing poetry. I didn't know anything about it. And I was in a bookstore, and New York used to have these really great magazine shops. There used to be a magazine, I think it was called Poets and Writers or something. I can't remember what it was called. But there was an article in there like how to be a poet. This is 1987, I guess. And it was dress nicely, memorize your text and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to make it as a poet. But I mean, I haven't changed. You know, I've never considered myself spoken word. I never even heard the phrase spoken word until I came to Germany in 1993. And I remember looking at this big banner at a place where I read, and it just said spoken word, blah, 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 U.S. poets or American poets or something. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but that's not me, you know? I'm not against orality, but for me, you were talking about like reading at New Yorker, which was important to me in a weird way, because I realized there was an appreciation for what I did. But as I started writing poetry, I became really aware of the audience. And I remember being at home, writing a poem, and writing a line and thinking to myself, oh, they're really gonna like that. And I went, oh, that's not why I do this, you know? And so I have not an easy, but it just was like a red flag that went up. And I was like, yeah, I'm not a performer. I just write. I'm not trying to necessarily elicit a favorable reaction. I'm not trying to get a reader or a listener to like me. And then so, you know, reading out loud or reading in public was such a big part of poetry. And like you, no reason that you would know, but I think people had all these assumptions about who I was and what I was going to say and all these other things. And I just kind of, just got old for me in a weird way, so I kind of stopped writing.
You stopped writing?
Sorry.
Objavio se dvije knjige pjesama. Druga tvoja knjiga, Joker Deuce, bila je knjiga dugih pjesama. I nakon nje si prestao pisati. Je li se nešto od te poezije i od tog ritma i od te glazbe, od tog jezika sačuvalo? Čini mi se da je u tvojoj prozi.
I hope so. You know, I guess I used to say, I don't talk about it very much, but I used to say poetry is like kind of the spinal column to my prose. I mean, it really, you know, it really makes me pay attention to every single word. So in a weird way, I still write like a poet.
Do you read aloud your text?
No, not at all. Not at all. But I mean, very occasionally, like if I'm stuck, you know, I'll read a sentence aloud, but I don't read and read aloud to myself. Just every now and then I might be lost in something, or I just can't get something, like I can't get a sentence to work or a paragraph, and then occasionally I'll read, but I don't read aloud. I mean, it's all right in here, I think, at some level.
Meni su ludi, dakle, prije nego što počnemo govoriti o selloutu, volio bi te pitati, čini mi se da je jako važan tvoj prvi roman, The White Boy Shuffle. Imaš, glavni lik ti se zove Gunnar Kaufman, on je pjesnik, čija je knjiga pjesama Watermelon prodana u 126 milijuna primjeraka. To svako od vas kupi milijun i imamo 126 milijuna. On je istodobno košarkaško čudo, on je crni mesija i kako sam sebe zove, on je crni demagog. Roman se objavio 1996. i čini mi se da otvara cijeli niz tema i nekakvih motiva i načina koje će te zanimati i dalje. Dakle, u drugim tvojim knjigama. Dakle, Gunnar, taj naš Gunnar, on dolazi iz obitelji Čiča Toma. Dakle, i to je nešto čemu ćemo se vratiti kad budemo govorili o prodanoj duši. Prodanih duša. Odrasta u Bjelačkom kvartu, Santa Monica na početku, i onda kad ih mama, njega i njegove sestre, čini mi se, hoće poslati na summer camp, all black summer camp, oni kažu da se oni ne osjećaju dobro sa ovom djecom, da su različiti od te djece. U tom trenutku mama ih odvodi u Hillside, dakle u kvart u LA-u koji je opasan, koji ima famu opasnog mjesta. U tom kvartu Gunnar se treba izboriti, dakle treba naći načina, treba se prilagoditi, treba, kako bi rekao, naučiti ne biti bijelac, naučiti biti dio zajednice. I sad te pitam, dakle, to su mi ovi segmenti. Glavni lik između kultura, u potrazi za identitetom, koji se nekim svojim čudnim metodama, on postaje košarkaš, postaje pjesnik, isto ulični pjesnik, bori s kulturnim stereotipima i mijenja zajednicu. Su li to neki ključni motivi u drugim tvojim knjigama ili... Sad će me poklopiti, sad će reći nešto, ne, sve si krivo shvatio. Ništa, you don't bother. Just something between me and my audience.
I can leave, it's like, no problem. You guys can have the conversation without me. Perfectly.
No, please.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. You mentioned the word identity. No one's going to know who I'm talking about, but actually I think she's blurbed in the book. There's a comedian, an American comedian named Sarah Silverman. I don't know if people know who she is. She's pretty famous in the States. And so I've known Sarah since probably she was like 10 years old. And she's kind of the same person. So I'm really pretty close with her family. And Sarah, like she is now, was like this strange, wonderful, really brilliant, original thinker, even as a kid. Like she's the first person who I went, she's gonna be fucking famous. I don't know how, but she's gonna, anyways. But I always remember she would tell her family, I either want to be a lesbian or a scientist, which I always loved. And like kudos to her family is the thing they would tell her was, you can be both. And that always really stayed with me, that story. And so like you're talking about White Boy Shuffle and the poet and all this whole thing, and like there's a line in that book which is something, I don't know, somebody said the word politically incorrect. I'm just going to say what I have to say, but
we are all like that here,
That's what everybody wants to believe, but that's all temporary. But there's a line in the book where the character Gunnar having a similar kind of discussion with his friends about what do you do, and he's like, he writes poem, and I can't remember the line now, but it's something like, are you a poet or a faggot? And he says to them, why can't I be both? And it's that thing, for me it's that notion of both, and not limiting. That's the thing that really kind of drives me, and it drives me in terms of language, it drives me in terms of content. When I first started writing, you were talking about sobriety, and for me it's not limited to African American literature. It's a big part of American literature. It's like the book hits a tone and you just stick with that tone. You hit a mood, you stick with that mood. And for me, I don't hear language that way. There's like a lot of there's a lot of confluence, there's a lot of polymorphics, there's a lot of things happening at once. And so for me, like one of the things that I really set out to do was try to merge all the different languages that are in my head. Some of them are just nonsensical, some of them are academic, some of them are just the way that me and my friends talk, some are the ways that I think. And so for me, it was like a long time to figure out how can I weave all these different languages into a singular thread. That took a long time for me to try to figure out how to do. I don't know why I'm telling this, but it's in my head. So once I was on a panel at a place called St. Mark's Poetry Project. I was still writing poetry then, and it was a panel about translation. And I don't really speak any other languages, and it came to me, and I just went, yeah, I have no idea why I'm on this panel. And another poet said, you're here because you do English to English translations. And that made perfect sense to me. I'm not really good at like summarizing what I do. I always take things that other people say about what I do. And that made perfect sense to me. And so those are the things that I'm trying to do. It's not so much the topical stuff necessarily. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Ali hoću ti reći, jednom drugom prilikom si rekao da su, i to me zanima, ne znači da ovo drugo što te pitam da me ne zanima, nego samo da me ovo sad isto jako zanima. Rekao si da su sve tvoje knjige o bivanju izgubljenim, dakle neki osjećaj izgubljenosti. Kako, na koji način?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about how you're lost because you're just lost, you know. And so
lost in the world.
Yeah, and sometimes they're about pretending to be lost. You know, I was doing an interview earlier, and the journalist talked about that sense of if you can feign some naivete, that gives you a lot of license because you can go, oh, I didn't know. And I get nervous when people know, you know, or pretend that they know. That makes me very nervous. And I just have to tell the story because maybe my friend Thomas Wolfhart, who started the lyric forum here.
He's waving there.
Where's Thomas? This is one of those things. Thomas was, he was the second person to invite me to Europe, invited me to Berlin way back in 1993. And I don't know if Thomas will remember this, but he runs a place called the Literaturwerkstatt, beautiful place. And I was there with these other American poets who really saw themselves as spoken word artists. And, you know, people were asking questions, and they all to a person stood up and talked about how brave they were, how bold their work was, all this kind of stuff, you know. And there was the drug addict poet, there was the Latino poet, there was, I don't know who I was, but there were these little categories. And I remember them saying that, and I felt weird because I was with them and thankful that they asked me to come. But they said all this stuff, and I went, yeah, I don't do what you do. Because for me, all your stuff is so safe. Because you put out all this stuff, and it's impossible for somebody to critique you, because if they critique you, it means that they're racist, it means that they're... And I don't like telling people how to read what I'm doing. And the other thing is, it's easy to hide behind identity in that way. Like, this is all I am, is this very visible, palatable identity at some level, even if it's just palatable on the page. And for me, it's just so much more than that, you know. And some of it comes from, again, my mom. I mean, she was a huge influence on me. You know, there were like 2 or 3 years in our household where my mom tried to raise me and my sisters as Japanese, you know. But as she saw it, you know, as what that meant to her. And so, and also like the notion of just, you know, I was fortunate to have lived in a couple of places in LA that maybe at some level superficially weren't diverse, but they were so diverse, you know. And I just early on watched people change identities, watch my identity change all the time. And so that's the thing that for me is like really interesting, like how this is always shifting. And the reasons behind that, how people cope. I mean, you're asking me that. And so, and so for me, the notion of being lost is nice because it gives me a place to go as a writer in terms of a narrative, you know. How do I do this, you know? How is somebody lost in Berlin? Like for me, my favorite book is my book Slumberland, which is, you know, I lived in Germany and I was so lost for any number of reasons. And it's like those characters trying to figure out how to orient themselves in the world, usually by doing something, pretending to do something in a weird way.
They have lots of sex there in that novel, or Slumberland.
Yeah, my friends used to talk about sex a lot in Berlin, so it's not something I talk about very much. But yeah, it was a part of it, because that was a huge part of how people shape their identity and would see me or see themselves, and I mean, so that was a part of that, you know, living there.
Dakle, nakon The White Boy Shuffle, to je bio prvi roman, uslijedili su Tough i uslijedio je, dakle, i Slumberland, i onda dolazi trenutak koji ti prije sellouta, prije romana Prodana duša, gdje bi rekao da si bio nekako na nekoj mapi. Mislim, je li ti u tom nekom smislu Bookerova nagrada promijenila život, evo? Ne, mislim... ne da je promijenila tebe, nego nešto se promijenilo.
Yeah, I don't know, if we're going to use the map thing, I think at some level everything's on the map, and my dot was very small on that map, which is fine. My dot's a little bit bigger, but that dot could easily shrink tomorrow. So it's like, that's fine. So I know that's not what you're asking, but I don't know, I don't really categorize myself like that. So, I think one of the things that people always ask me to do is to help them, who's your audience? Where are you? Where do you fit? Where do you belong? And I understand the need to do that, but I just do what I do, and I let other people do it. One of the nice things with this book, it's more international than, things I've written previously, is, I was in India talking to a guy named Sandeep, and one of the things is, in the middle of the thing, he's just talked about, and he went on a little tangent about how Indian the book is, I had students come to me and go, hey, my father loves your book. He thinks you're the last great Jewish writer. And so that's like that map for me it's extant, but those borders are so movable. And again, it's like that, there's this hideous phrase, Lebensraum, and I always think about like the cost of declaring territory, be it mental territory, being expressive territory, and those are the things that for me that I write about, and some people pick up on that, some people don't.
Spomenuo si Indiju, tamo sam te upoznao i spomenuo si to iskustvo kada tvoja knjiga ulazi u neke nove prostore. Kako su je tamo pročitala na jedan način. Misliš li da knjiga, što je, dobro, zaboravio ovo pitanje, poslije ću se vratiti na njega, može, poslije ću doći na njega. Idemo na sellout, da prvo kažemo ljudima o čemu je, nekako da postavimo stvari. Meni se čini da su neke tri točke, a može ih biti puno više i mogu biti neke poslije druge, u ovom romanu bile bitne. Bio mi je bitan taj ulazak u roman u kojem imate glavnog naratora zapravo, koji se preziva, ne znamo mu zapravo ime, preziva se Ja. On sjedi na klupi, optuženičkoj klupi u Vrhovnom sudu u Sjedinjenih Američkih Država i čeka optužnica, zapravo parnica se zove Ja protiv Sjedinjenih Američkih Država. Optužen je za rasnu segregaciju i robovlasništvo. On je Afroamerikanac. To je prva točka. Druga točka je grad, Dickens. Dakle, to je izmišljen grad, zapravo izmišljen, to je jedan prostor, gradić kojeg je LA pojeo. Dakle, pojeo ga je, a on je neka vrsta oaze, u njemu još uvijek ljudi u vrtovima sade povrće, imaju stoku, krave, kokoši i tako dalje. I onog trena kad šireći se LA, gentrifikacija se provodi, hoće ga pojesti, uzimaju ga, brišu ga s mape i on i zajednica koja živi u tom gradu, a to je afroamerička zajednica zajedno sa latinoameričkom zajednicom, ona gubi nešto. Treća točka je Hominy Jenkins, lik, jedan bivša filmska zvijezda, teško reći, dakle glumac koji je glumio kao dijete u jednoj seriji Little Rascals, Mali vragolani, isto Afroamerikanac, koji je bio neka vrsta lokalnog celebritija, dolazili su ljudi sa svih strana posjećivati ga. Onog trena kad Dickens nestaje sa mape, nestaje i Hominijev na neki način život. I Homini se ide samo linčovati, dakle on se ide objesiti i u tom trenutku ga spašava narator i Homini želi biti njegov rob. Dakle, i tjera ga, i sad ovaj Ja uzima Hominija za roba i on je malo čudna vrsta roba, ne želi baš raditi i tako dalje. Ali pomaže zapravo glavnom junaku, naratoru, da provede segregaciju, rasnu segregaciju u Dickensu. Jesu li to točke, ili što bi dodao tome, na kojima ovaj roman raste? Što je, ako postoji, ja znam, jedan put sam čitao isto tako da si rekao da najviše mržiš pitanje kako je roman nastao. Ja te baš sad moram pitati što je bila jezgra tvog romana, kako si, na što je...
So, a lot of it goes back to being lost and bring me back, you know, when I start to wander a little. So, you know, when I was thinking about the book, very much like what you described, I had these three notions. I had the hominy character, I had the sense of the place, you know, this weird little neighborhood. What was the third thing that you said?
The narrator, for me, I mean...
Yeah, the narrator I didn't quite have, but I had some of the things that he was going to be grappling with. But I didn't know what the story was. And there's a writer who I really respect a lot named Rebecca Solnit. And she was talking about this book that she had written about San Francisco and identity, but it's kind of, she's just mapping San Francisco in weird different ways. And we happened to get the same grant, so I was listening to her think her book out loud. And then she was talking and I went, oh man, my book is going back to being lost a little bit. My book is just about crossing the street. You know, because from where I grew up in this small little nondescript neighborhood, but if I cross the street one way, it's this really insanely wealthy neighborhood. If I cross the street another way, it was a neighborhood that we sort of perceived as dangerous. You know, so these, I was like, oh. But then I keep thinking about, for me, how I cross the street is really important. So none of this is going to make any sense. I apologize. So in Los Angeles, if you cross against the red light, you can get a ticket, you know. I have a friend, my friend Charlie, actually got beaten up by the cops for jaywalking, and the cops followed him, and they were calling him, hey you, but he just didn't hear them, and they got angry that he didn't respond, and they actually beat his ass for crossing the street. In places in LA, I was in a neighborhood in LA once, visiting a woman that was, I guess we were both very young, but that was sort of my girlfriend, and crossed the street into a street called Comstock. Cop pulled me over and just went, you don't belong here, get the fuck out of the neighborhood. When I went to Boston, I took the bus from LA to Boston for the first time, Greyhound bus. I get off the bus, I have my little suitcase, it's 6 in the morning, the streets are completely empty, and I'm standing waiting for the light to change to cross the street. You know, and I always remember a person going past me going, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know? I think I'm going back to Thomas. I think about going to Berlin and how much of a thing about crossing the street was, you know, cross the street and some person is like, you don't do this, you're setting a bad example. Anyways, crossing the street for some reason I can, you know, I don't want to stretch the metaphor more than it's worth. So that's like an important thing for me. What else are we trying to get to? Sorry.
We were trying to make some. We were trying to make some kind of.
Are these the pillars of the
pillars
of the book?
Of the novel? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you're talking about this character whose surname is Me. You know, I don't know who the character is, but you know, as I was doing research for the book and just rifling through my own files and trying to figure out where this book is going to start, and I finally realized it was going to start in the Supreme Court. And you know, I just kept thinking about the legacy of cases that you learn in school, you read about in the paper, and it's always so-and-so versus so-and-so, so-and-so versus, and at some level the phrase me versus the United States popped into my head. I was like, oh, that's pretty fucking cool. But then I had to justify, because I actually looked in an old phone book, and no one had the last name Me, so I was like, okay, but it forced me to recreate that history of the character. And so that was really important for me to just kind of do that. And then the character's pretty nameless throughout the book, you know.
He has a very interesting upbringing, you know. I adore, I mean,
sorry.
Ispričavam se. You put, please. Glavni junak ili pripovjedač je zapravo prošao prilično teško djetinjstvo sa svojim ocem koji ga je odgajao. Otac je bio profesor sociologije, ako se ne varam, i odgajao je tako da ga je izlagao svim važnim svojim verzijama socioloških eksperimenata. To je bilo vrlo bolno djetinjstvo i u jednom trenutku oca su policajci ubili na ulici. Ti neki momenti koje unosiš, na kojima počiva, osim ovih glavnih stupova, znam da glavni stupovi ne rješavaju ništa zapravo. Ono što si morao napraviti, što si napravio jedno snažno tkivo književno, sve je kompaktno, sve je organski izraslo. Ti si sad spomenuo kako je prezime nastalo, a onda dolazimo, dakle, njegov otac je njihovo obiteljsko prezime srezao da bi kao olakšao život malom Miju, malom Jau. Da se vratimo na ove stvari koje su mi silno bitne. U prvoj knjizi spominješ nasilje koje je buknulo u LA-u nakon presude, nakon Rodneya Kinga, dakle to si doživio, bio si u LA-u tada ili nisi, jesi li imao iskustvo toga? Nisi, dobro, ok. Ovdje govoriš o stvari koja je bila vrlo aktualna i stalno jest, to je policijsko nasilje nad Afroamerikancima i to je, dobro, ne znam, dobro. Koliko je, a cijelo vrijeme je prisutan humor. Dakle, kod mene kao čitatelja tjeraš me da mi stalno titra, svjestan sam toga da je sve što govoriš bolno, da su stvari teške, da su stvari zbiljne, da ti je stalo govoriti o njima, ali s druge strane me tjeraš na smijeh. Ti si rekao, ne razmišljaš o tome, samo pišeš, ali to je odgovor.
That's the same thing. No, I mean, it's like, I don't think about this brutality. I mean, I do think about brutality, you know. I learned a lot about identity through brutality, you know. And so you were talking about White Boy Shuffle. And I mean, I was so young. I must have been 6 and 7 years old. My best friend was a kid named David Eisenstadt. And we were both obsessed with Nazis, you know. But I learned so much about identity, and thankfully his dad and my mom allowed us to indulge that, you know. And his father would take us to these airplane shows. I write about it a little bit because it's so important to me. And he would take us to these airplane shows, and David and I would go, oh, a fucking Messerschmitt 109, you know. And then even when I first started writing, I mean, I think about being in 2nd grade and writing whatever I had to write in 2nd grade, and going up to one of my favorite teachers, Mrs. Belfour, and I went, Mrs. Belfour, how do you spell Messerschmitt? You know? But these things, the reaction to these things and what they meant to me and how much I learned about brutality. And so for me and my publisher, Sai, were talking about this. And it's not the topical stuff. He did a really good thing. He talked about this vertical things that is no matter how far we think we've progressed or regressed, there's this kind of static. For me, there are things about just how people treat each other that don't change in any fucking setting, you know, for me. You know, so things sort of move forward, but still, nevertheless, there's this constant, you know. Some of it's beautiful, a lot of it's ugly, I don't know, we could discuss what those specifics are. So that it's not like the topical things, and it's like why I don't reference specific events or specific people when I write, you know, because I don't want somebody to tie something back, you know, because there's going to be a ton of killings, there's going to be a ton of riots, and they're all basically the same thing. Like, those things aren't going anywhere in the near future. And it's not about who's writing against whom, it's just these people feel put upon and are expressing themselves for whatever reason in that fashion. So there's not much violence in my books. So, you know, you talked about White Boy Shuffle, and there's a riot They join the riot, but they're beating each other with bread loaves, you know, as opposed
But the father beats the hell out of the son.
Yeah, and so that's like one of the few points where there's violence. And I was going to say something else, which is not directly related to that, but it's one of the things that I learned from, I used to study psychology. And you know, as I get older, like young writers, oftentimes young writers of color will come up to me and say, hey, thank you for doing what you do. And I'm like, what have I done? And sometimes they say to me is, you're writing about identity without all the fucking baggage. You know, all the baggage is there, but I'm not addressing this. And it comes from when I was in grad school. At some point I was getting my doctorate in psychology before I started writing. And we're meeting, I have a professor who was really important to me, this professor named Bob Chin. And we were meeting at his house. It was a small group of people. I don't know what we were talking about, something difficult to talk about. And one of the students went, we're all human beings. And he just turned to her and he went, which is something that many of us say all the time, you know, you hear it all the time, but he turned to her and he said, why do you feel the need to say that? You know, and that fucked me up when he said that. You know, like, what's your sense? Because that should be a given. And so I oftentimes feel like writers are often trying to justify their humanity. You know, let me start here, walk you through slavery, blah, 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 whatever it is. You know, as like, hey, I'm human too. That does not interest me. You know, and for me it's like I kind of try to take it as a given that there's certain things that I'm not going to bother to explain. I don't have to justify my humanity to anybody. So in some ways it allows me to skip over a lot of explanation, a lot of for me it would be posturing for me, maybe not for someone else. And the violence for me is like this notion of, I love psychology. I mean, I learned so much from it. But the notion of this kind of soft science still having a huge element of violence to it, you know, whether it's physical or not, you know. And, you know, I studied social psychology, and a lot of that is about violence because it's about, like, perception and when people tend to act out. And, you know, I don't think I'm answering your question about that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
I'm done. Sorry.
Napisao si, još da se bavio poezijom, spomenuo si da si napisao jednu pjesmu u kojoj samoga sebe vrijeđaš, u kojem govoriš najbolnije stvari o sebi. I da ti je možda na taj način omogućeno da iz sebe izađeš i pogledaš, ako sam ja to dobro shvatio, i stvari koje su izvan tebe. Ono da si na neki način zaradio tu mogućnost. Meni se činilo da je i ovaj roman na neki način, ne da se vrijeđaš sebe, nego da dotičeš jako bolne stvari. Stvari koje su bolne bilo tebi unutar svijeta i zemlje u kojoj živiš, i da se upravo zbog toga što su ti bolne možeš dignuti, pogledati ih i pričati o njima ovako kako pričaš. I'm lost.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean, these are things, I don't know if painful is the right word, but they're things that I care about. And I don't know, a lot of my friends are dying lately, so recently just an old writer friend of mine named Steve Cannon died, and I met an old friend of mine she's a poet named Sheila Maldonado. She's a beautiful poet. But I don't want to say she's off, but she writes about things in ways that people aren't accustomed to. And she said a beautiful phrase to me, and she went, I care, I just don't care the way you care. And I love that. She didn't mean me specifically, but she meant you as these people who are judging her work. And that really resonated with me when she said that. And mean, again, it's a lot like I've talked about, is I never had to ask for permission to do very much. And so it's not something I do when I write. You know, in some ways, I don't really talk about this shit except when I'm doing these things. So I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you, but I was on a panel at the Brooklyn Book Festival or whatever it is. I was with a bunch of writers, and the moderator asked them, so why do you write what you write? Why do you do what you do? And for the most part, they all said whatever they, but the woman who spoke before me, she was like, well, I'm trying to invite everybody into my world, and I want to just, we're all welcome, and I don't really think about this, but when she said it, I went, oh yeah, that's not what I do. And it's like me, sort of like me as a person is, you know, I try to push people away a little bit, you know.
I noticed that.
And I'm like that in real life sometimes, but I do try to leave the door ajar just a touch. And I don't know, I guess maybe I'm not really interested in talking about violence, I guess, but
let me ask you another thing. Okay, so tvoj glavni lik je optužen za robovlasništvo i rasnu segregaciju. Kako je došlo do toga? Zašto taj ja želi segregirati? Se kaže segregirati, je? Je tako? Volim. Dickens. Što ga motivira i što se može napraviti segregaciju. Zapravo to je zajednica u kojoj nema bijelaca. Samo su Latinoamerikanci i Amerikanci afričkog porijekla. Što se dobija?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. For me, that was one of the interesting things to try to explore. So much of it comes from living in Germany a little bit, you know, and how familiar the way people spoke about reunification, how historically familiar that was to me. And when people thought they were segregating, when people didn't think they were, it was interesting. When people felt that they were being segregated, you know. I was very fortunate to have people like Thomas. I mean, most of my friends that I could really talk to, because we didn't have to start at square one, were East German. There was just something that we shared. And so like in this case, for me it was, God, there used to be this phrase, nostalgia. You know, we talked about it a little bit earlier. And for me, it's always really interesting for me, it's kind of happening in the States, when people romanticize something that never existed, and then something that actually wasn't very good, you know? And so that's always really interesting to me. And so, in the States, occasionally you hear people say, oh, we were better off under segregation. We had our own such and such, you know. And people are very serious about it. And always kind of, go ahead.
Afro-American people or white people?
I think you hear people say it in different contexts. So I mean it in this case, specifically African-American people. But I think I hear it all the time. Like Trump is basically saying the same thing, you know. He's preaching to people who basically don't have anything. You were better then, even though they had nothing then either, you know. But it's a weird kind of fake positive reinforcement. But so anyways, that's always strikes me as weird when people say that. You know, in my day we didn't get away with this. I was like, your day was just as fucked up as this day. But that's how I think, you know. And so for me it was interesting to think about, well, how would that play out now? You know, we use this word segregation, we use these words integration, we use all these progressive, we use these words progress, without really talking about like what we mean by them. We just name drop them. And then so, one is segregation something that involves whiteness? I don't think so necessarily. Is it something that's a priori, or is it something that, you know, we have to manipulate to make happen? So for me, all that stuff was fun to experiment with. And so it was interesting for me, like in some of the reviews of the book. Even though they were positive, they kept talking about segregation and slavery, but there is no segregation and slavery in the book. You know, it's all like what's the weight of these words, what's the burden of these words, how do they redefine us? Because he realizes, it's hard for me to talk about why. It was one of the hardest things to do in the book is to make that feel like a valid, irrational, illogical way of looking at the world. And then so, I think what he realizes is that he could use it as a construct. I mean, he has no power. I mean, segregation is something that the government, that society does. Individuals don't do it. They choose to separate themselves. But he kind of just takes the jargon and the language and the methodology of that. He can't, I mean, he has no power to segregate, you know, so he paints a line around the neighborhood. He puts up all these, you know, it's all symbolism, you know? But that symbolism kicks in some kind of very learned kind of behaviors in a certain set of people. And so for me that was just you know, like how do you segregate something that on the surface is all the same for some people, you know? And so that was fun for me to try to explore.
U romanu postoji jedna scena u kojoj u jednom baru afroamerički komičar, u tom baru se okuplja, to je Dam Donuts, okuplja se forum za slobodu afroameričke duhovitosti. Komičar pred publikom priča viceve i tema im je rasa. Dakle, i u jednom trenutku sve je u redu, ljudi se smiju dok se ne pojave dvoje bijelaca, jedan par bijelaca koji se također smije. I onda taj komičar kaže odjebite, dakle, vi se nemate pravo smijeti. Ono što nam daje pravo da se smijemo, kako humor funkcionira, je li humor, mislim, evo, uvijek ovako.
Sorry.
Da, šta.
Do you want me to say something or no?
Je, da. Ima li se, mislim, ti markiraš situaciju u kojoj, vidim koliko mari. Markiraš situaciju u kojoj je, bijelci nisu pozvani da se smiju nečemu čemu se smiju u tom trenutku, u knjizi. Dakle,
yeah, so,
bila je isto, ako hoćeš još ću nešto nadopuniti, bila je jedna neugodna situacija, zapravo u Australiji na Sydney Writers Festivalu, u kojoj je intervjuer spominjao i naglašavao neke dijelove knjige koji poskliznuo se, dakle nije dobro odmjerio, nije prešao neku crtu. Očito da crta nekakva postoji, da postoji određeno minsko polje oko nas kad govorimo ne samo o knjizi. Mislim da je ovdje u toj sceni u kojoj su bijelci potjerani neka mina. Evo ja bih te pitao kakva je to mina, mislim možeš nam reći nešto o tome?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the translation. She said this is a mine?
It's a minefield.
Oh, like a minefield.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I'm going to start with what you said, like this thing of permission to laugh. And there's, I don't know, maybe some people know it. I don't know who the filmmaker was. But a filmmaker did a documentary where he talked about the archiving of all these Nazi propaganda movies, you know. And so part of this movie is he's showing clips of these movies. Some of them, you know, because I love crazy stuff I'd seen already, but it was interesting to see them back to back, and a lot of them I hadn't seen. So I was in a theater in New York, just laughing at some of this, you know, Luftwaffe pilots, you know, bombing Poland or whatever, singing their songs and shit, you know, and American movies are just as stupid, and I'm fucking busting up laughing, but I'm the only person in the theater laughing. And the theater's packed, But in part of the movie, the filmmaker is showing some of the same snippets of his film in progress to a college class in Israel somewhere. And those students are watching some of the same stuff that we've already seen, and they're fucking howling. Like, they're cracking up. And then so what was interesting for me is, once the audience had seen that scene, they started laughing in the movie. Because for whatever reason, they felt they had permission, you know? For me, it's just, I am who I am. I tend to laugh at the wrong time all the time. It's, you know, that's part of it. And then so, but I think about these things, you know, like, when people get angry at someone for laughing, when people don't get angry, when you're allowed, I don't have like a guideline or a rule about this. And so the scene that you're talking about in the book is actually something that sort of really happened. Like, my sister loves stand-up comedy, and so she goes to these things, and she talked about being in LA, and there was a comedian named Robin Harris. I guess it's early 90s, late 80s, I'm not sure when this was, and you know, there was a growing black stand-up scene in LA, very vibrant. He was really funny, pretty famous, and she said that she was in this club, he sat down, and there were two white people in the front row. Everybody else, I guess I wasn't there, but everyone else is black, and he says, the show's not gonna start until you guys leave. And he's not laughing, but everybody starts laughing except for, you know, including these two people. Like, they think that it's part of his act. They didn't know how to read it. And I wasn't there, so I can't talk about it. This is just me imagining something. But they didn't know how to read it. He says it again. No, I'm fucking dead serious. And then eventually the people go, oh, he's serious. And they decide to leave, you know. He asked them to leave, demanded they leave. You know, they could have sat and stayed. And, you know, then I guess people clapped, and I just went, yeah, what is all that about? You know, is that real power? Is that, like, does that make you feel good about yourself? So to me, it's like such a, I don't know, the phrase Pyrrhic victory or whatever. It's just, but I understand the need for him to feel like this is ours. This is, you know, this belongs to us. I don't subscribe to that. Like, you know, I think you put something out in the public and it's fodder. It's not fair necessarily, but I think that when something's out there, it's out there, and you know, you don't have any control over it, nor should you, even though a ton of unfair things can happen, you know. So yeah, I don't have like an answer about this permission, and I can't help it. So like with the cover of this book, for a number of reasons, the notion of these lawn jockeys in the States is very taboo. So when I grew up young, you would see these black lawn jockeys. There's a ton of history behind it. But it was like a taboo, racist kind of thing to have. And then at some point, people started painting the lawn jockeys white. So occasionally you still see them, but they're white. So I was like, they were trying to figure out a cover for the book. And I was so happy that they chose this, because the book also, the cover presents a challenge. And then so occasionally I would hear stories, oh, I love your book, but I'm on the subway and I don't want anybody to see that I have this book, so I have to, you know. And so, but that's sorry. Oh. Sorry about that. Next. I mean, life's hard, you know, a little bit. Not everything is digestible for everybody, especially in public. And so I kind of really like that they chose that cover, even though I was like, well, what does it say about the book? But I guess it's, you know, it's appropriate in a weird way. So that was, I don't know, that was a good gesture on them, that they took a risk just with putting that on the cover, you know? I was going to say something else, but I can't remember what it was.
Kad je puno je toga napisano o knjizi i ako postoje neke etikete, onda je to bila satira, to je bio neki apsurdistička vizija i tako dalje. Ti si zapravo osjećaš prilično nelagodno sa takvim tipom etiketiranja. Zašto?
I guess I don't really, it's not a word I ever use. I kind of even don't know what it means. I often find when people use the word, they're kind of using it as a way to distance themselves from what's uncomfortable about the book. But I used to have a really hard time talking about it, and a friend of mine named John Day, he was like, you know what, when you talk about it, he sent me a link to an interview of Nabokov talking about Lolita. So it's him, he's on television. It's a really strange piece of film. But it's him, Lionel Trilling, who's like this literary critic in the States, or used to be. And they're talking about a Lolita, a book that I actually love. But they're talking about it as a satire. And I was like, man, I've never even thought about that book as a satire. To me, it's just a damn good book. You know, so that word for me is like it can be like a buffer. You know, so I'm uncomfortable with that.
Znači, s jedne strane, knjiga završava, nije razriješeno skroz kako će se, gdje je Amerika u tom trenutku, kako završava parnica ja protiv Amerike. Kakva je tvoja vizija? Nisi previše optimističan, a s druge strane, da bi čovjek pisao i da bi čovjek pisao humor, pretpostavljam da mora biti unutra, ima neka energija, neki vigor koji tjera na neku, ne znam je li optimizam prava riječ, možda uopće nije, ali energija da se pofajta sa svim tim što knjiga donosi.
What are you asking me? I'm sorry.
Pesimizam naspram energije koju knjiga donosi. Gdje smo sad? Gdje si ti? Osim u Zagrebu.
Yeah, I feel like I'm about to commit suicide or something like that. Yeah, I don't know where I am. I don't know. I've been saying this a lot because I don't steal when I write, but I steal when I talk about writing a lot. So I think the thing is, we're always like asking these questions, where are you? Where are we? Da da da. And not so long ago, it's one of the best things about getting to listen to other writers talk. They're just better at summarizing things than I am. And there's a writer, Hilary Mantel, who tells this anecdote that I now tell. And in response to a similar kind of question, she tells a story about how, I guess in the 50s or in the 60s, a reporter asked Ho Chi Minh, what's the meaning of the French Revolution? And Ho Chi Minh goes, time will tell. And so I love that anecdote because that's how, I mean, it fits how I think, you know, and I think about like things I like, Hannah Arendt, you know, the same kind of thing. It's not, none of this stuff is so fixed, you know. There's so many underlying occurrence, and so that's where I'm at, you know. And I'm not a very energetic person, so it just takes me a long time to cobble the energy to write. So.
Zadnja stvar prije nego što kažem ovo Time Will Tell, dok si pisao knjigu, čini mi se Obama je bio predsjednik, sad je Trump, neki shift, neka promjena, vidiš li je, ne vidi, mislim, ti se zezaš malo ne na Obamu, nego na crnog predsjednika, tako ga spominješ unutra, nije posve jasno u knjizi, našao si neki način da ne imenuješ i da nije jasno. Time will tell.
Are you talking about change?
Yes.
Yeah, in some things, aspects, time does change. You know, I mean, things do change. I don't want to say that things don't change, but it's like, let's say that vertical thing doesn't change. And often I think we frame change around people that have access to that change, you know, who are able to benefit from, okay, we're going to integrate universities. But there's a small segment of people that are allowed to benefit from that. You know, so for a large segment, things don't change. I was doing one of these talks with a guy, and there was a historian. It was right before the election. Everybody's really nervous. And he was like, I want to, you know, he's a really noted person. And he goes, I just want to calm everyone down. Whether Hillary wins or whether Trump wins, things will be okay. And from my perspective, it's whether Hillary wins or whether Trump wins, things are not going to be okay. You know, so, but that's just my own pessimism, my own kind of, that's just, you know, my own little, not demons, but just how I see the world, I guess. But I understand the need to make people feel like things are going to be okay, you know, and I'm just not one of those people who goes, who can guarantee anything. I'm not like that, because things change, and yeah, I don't know what
And time will tell. Sa ovim optimističnim riječima s kojima nas je Paul Beatty ispratio u noć, ja vas pozdravljam i molim vas da velikim pljeskom nagradite ovog čovjeka.